Hey everybody, it's Dick here. Today we're going to be talking about the windshield on my F700GS Rally. We'll talk about the stock windshield, and we'll also do a comparison with the new high Givi windshield, which should help with touring and at high speeds and out on the motorway. So here's the stock windshield. You can see it's very short. It's got kind of this Batman geometric thing going on for it. It doesn't seem to offer a lot of wind protection for the rider, but it does offer aerodynamics for the bike. If you notice under the windshield, there's lots of chunky, non-aerodynamic, squared off bits, and that could catch air and really affect the speed and the efficiency of the bike as a vehicle. Normally when I see these small windshields or windscreens, it's to hide the ugliness of the instrument panel and the wires coming out from behind it. But you can see how BMW has kept a clean design and were able to have this be translucent, rather than opaque like you'd see on the Ducati Monster. These kind of remind me of the Harley dealers telling me that the big headlamp on a Fat Boy has wind buffeting effects, and it's not as harsh as you would imagine without a windshield. I didn't buy it with the Harley guys, and I don't think I'd buy it now with BMW. Out on the road, I immediately felt the wind right at the top of my shoulders, under my neck and helmet, and kind of hitting me in the head. For me, it wasn't unpleasant because most of the bikes I ride don't have windshields on them, so I'm used to being hit right in the chest with the wind. But now that I'm being aware of it, the windshield seems to send the wind right to where I don't want it, right at the top of my shoulders, hitting me in the forehead. There wasn't any buffeting throwing my head around. I didn't feel like my neck was being jarred or that the helmet felt heavier than usual. But the windshield, as it stands, stock, sends the wind right to, I think, where we don't want it, especially if you're going to be riding with an open face helmet or with your visor up. I only noticed after I got home that my battery tender that I had just installed recently was hanging out the side of the fairing. This was my first ride of the year, and I was very eager. I unplugged the bike, hopped on, and that was dragging along the whole way. Didn't even notice it, was just so happy to be out. I'm interested to see if the volume of the wind coming off that windshield and the power of the wind hitting me is going to be very different with the taller windshield. We'll see after we install it. As with most of the Torx screws that are on the cockpit area of the BMW, it's a Torx T25. There are 4 bolts holding it on to the instrument panel at the front. Be mindful when using your Torx screwdriver around the plexiglass of the windshield. Some carelessness or some speed could risk a scratch, or some damage that would devalue it if you're trying to sell it on in the secondary market, or to keep it and put it back on later. You'll find a little rubber washer behind the bolt that's protecting the windshield from over-tightening and scratching from the bolt. Make sure that you don't lose that. Put the bolts in a safe place. The washer sometimes will just stick to the bolt because of how tight it's been put on at the factory, or how snug the rubber is, but you want to make sure that you're not losing it or careless. Just be aware that it's there. There is a metal washer set into a rubber seal behind the windshield, and be careful that they don't come away. There's 4 of them in each of the little rubber seals. Again, 3 of them for me stuck into the seals and didn't come away, and 1 did come away. So just be aware when you're taking it apart that you don't lose those little washers. Just for comparison's sake, I have the stock windshield laid over the top of the new Givi windshield. You can see the stock windshield is this faint line right there, There is quite a big difference in height between the stock and the new Givi windshield. If we measure the difference, we'll see from the top of the Givi, the highest point, to the highest point of the stock is about 10 inches, which I believe is about 25.5 or just under centimeters. So quite a big difference, and we'll see how that affects the wind. Here they are side by side. They are difficult to see as they're translucent and it's against this brick background, but hopefully you can see the faint outlines of each of them and see the drastic difference in size. Installation is as straightforward as taking off the stock. There are 4 holes along the front. There are 2 additional holes on either side of the cowl, but there's no manufacturing hardware or holes on the stock fairing, so I'm reluctant to make any additional holes, so we'll see how it goes just with those 4. You have to flex it out a little bit just to get it around that fairing. I've been very impressed with how well Givi aftermarket parts have fit onto the BMW, specifically with the Outback Trekker luggage racks in the back. Hopefully this will be as easy and straightforward as the other parts. I'm going to hand tighten first, just so as not to damage the plexi. Again, make sure that those rubber washers that came off of the bolts are still there, and that the metal washers are set within the seals behind it. Just tight enough, not too tight. I'll check these after a couple of rides to make sure they don't come loose, but you don't want to risk damaging your new windshield by over-tightening. That's the windshield installed. I am a bit concerned about the steering radius. There seems to be the potential, there's actually no potential, there's actual contact there. I don't actually lock my handlebars all that much when I'm riding on the road, one way or the other. I would imagine doing a little adventure riding, I would do more locking of the steering, so if I was going to do some adventure riding or some dual sport riding on this bike, I would probably switch it out to the stock windshield. Also, the height of the windshield means that if I crashed or fell over, the fall would put a lot of stress on this trellis area that's holding it on. It might do considerable damage. There's some movement in there already. As a touring windshield, this is probably going to work out very well, but as a kind of off-road or adventure or dual sport windshield, it might be too high, or at least a little bit of cutout should happen there. The lack of a bolt on this side here, there is a little vibration at speed, and I don't know if that would fix it. There are also contacts there as well, but there is no bolt, and I don't want to go ahead and be drilling into the manufactured fairing. So those are the issues, I think, right now, looking at the installed windshield. Both test ride videos are capturing the wind noise just from my helmet mic, and the wind noise from the taller windshield is considerably reduced. The wind power against my body is greatly reduced in the chest, still pretty violent and hard against the shoulders up when the narrow windshield gets near the top. And if I sit high enough, that wind will come right off the top of that windshield and hit me right under the visor of my helmet. If I don't sit too tall, I'm about 5'7" in height, it will go right over my helmet, which I think is the sweet spot where it's looking to go. But if I do sit tall, it'll catch me under the visor and pull my head back a bit. If I was a bit taller, say 6 foot, this probably would be a bit short for me, and I would probably opt for a helmet that doesn't have a visor on it so that it would be more aerodynamic. But as it stands, and for my use, this will be a perfect touring screen. I got this for £50 off of a secondary sale on Gumtree. So for the price, for the performance, you can't beat it. Givi is really proving itself to be my go-to manufacturer for aftermarket parts that are affordable, but that will do the job. So there you have it. Very easy installation on the new Givi windshield. Considerable difference out on the highway and at speed. It's almost like you're in a bubble. I never really ride with windshields. No bikes I have tall windshields, but I can see the allure. I think it's going to make this bike a really comfortable long tourer.